The MBR interview submission is one of the more unusual MBR templates, and the idea here is that this particular article is going to provide some background on an individual of interest, include a transcript of an interview, normally in question and answer format, and normally conducted by the author, and present some key takeaways from the interview. It is not a theory-based submission. Rather, it's a place where you can put an interesting conversation with someone who is hopefully of significance. The acceptance of an MBR interview will take into consideration things like the prominence of the individual or group of individuals that you're interviewing, because you could have more than one person or you could have a collection of interviews. The significance of the content of the interviews. Are they saying anything interesting that has not been said before? And is what they're saying something that you might be able to put into practice so that it engages the reader? And finally, the degree to which it seems likely to contribute to the body of business or managerial knowledge. If the interview just says things that have already been said, then it probably is not going to be that interesting to reviewers. The instructions for the interview template are pretty much the same as the other template instructions. You take the template, you save it, you write in the template using the styles provided, title, headings, and so forth. And there is a reviewer appendix at the end, although this appendix is probably smaller than for many of the other article types, because what it's trying to convince the reviewer, as opposed to the reader, is that this interview was conducted in a rigorous way. The MBR interview cover page is similar to other cover pages. You've got a title, you've got a tagline. It's important to create a tagline which captures some of the key things in the interview and also who's being interviewed. It's limited to 25 to 50 words because it's going to be used on the cover of the journal to identify the article. It'll be used on the website. It might be sent out over Twitter feeds or Facebook feeds. So you want to think of it as basically the hook that's going to get people to click on a link that will get them to read the interview. You want to have some keywords. These are primarily of interest to researchers who might be researching either the individual being interviewed or the topic. They don't appear in the article. And then there's an executive summary which does appear in the article, which should just give the highlights of the interview. And once again, the purpose of the executive summary is to ensure that the reader is hooked enough so that they will come and actually read the rest of the article. The structure of the interview is fairly straightforward. In the body of the document, you give a title of the interview. You give an introduction, which will just kind of give the context of the interview. You can then write some background on the interviewee, the person being interviewed, and that should hopefully add to the credibility of the article or suggest that they have some special expertise that warranted the interview. The interview itself, we encourage the use of kind of a question and answer format. Here's an example from an interview article that I wrote with Ray Goldberg, who was one of the individuals who actually created the term agribusiness at Harvard Business School in the 1950s. You probably want to follow your interview with some sort of discussion section where you kind of synthesize ideas from the interview, and when possible, you can bring in the broader academic research literature, though this is not necessarily required. If the interview is interesting enough, the interview itself should sell the article. You can then have some conclusions regarding key takeaway from the interview. As with all the conclusion sections, try to make them self-contained so that they don't, so that the reader can look at the conclusions by themselves, usually trying to decide whether or not it's worth going into the body of the paper. And finally, the references should use APA format, which is the standard for all the MUMA business review submissions. The reviewer appendix for the interview template is going to be focused on a number of things. Of particular interest is, how did you end up with this particular interview? How did you come up with the questions? And what was the protocol for the interview? Was it done in a single session? Was it multiple sessions? You know, was the transcript evaluated by the interviewee before it was written out? And all these types of things. And really what we're trying to do here is convince the reviewers that the interview was conducted in a rigorous and systematic way. If you have interesting discussion and conclusions that come out of the interview, you might talk a little bit about how you came to those conclusions, how you conducted the analysis. Sometimes text analysis tools are used for interviews, not normally for a single interview, but if you used any tools, you should mention that. And you know, if the literature review was inspired by the interview or something like that, then that's stuff that you should mention as well. Finally, you want to make sure that you have permissions, including permission from the interviewee to use the interview. I think generally speaking, we would like to know, for example, if you verified the transcript with the individual that you were interviewing. Typically, there will not be a lot of things like images in an interview, but if you do have images, such as a picture of the person you're interviewing, be sure to make that you actually have the right to copy it. Because a lot of times, for example, photographers will maintain the copyright to any photo, which means that you can't just use it arbitrarily.